You are now tuned in to Tear Down and Rebuild. Welcome to the Tar Pit. I hope y'all having a beautiful Sunday. I know mine here in North Carolina is amazing. I wanted to come to all of you with probably about 1,000 different topics. I've recorded this podcast about 6 times and deleted it. And I'm not talking about, I recorded 5 minutes and deleted. I'm talking about one of these recordings was 45 minutes long, and at the end of it, I was like, this is not right. And I'm not going to just throw something out here just so that I could have it on time. I know I want to be able to record on Saturday so that at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning on Sundays, the cast goes up. But I'm also not going to just throw up anything. I would rather have it be a little bit late and have it be right than to have it be on time and have y'all wondering if I'm okay. The reason I was having such an issue with recording is because this last week so many things have happened that it's like my mind was scattered on what to talk about. And every time I would start recording, the 2 topics that kept coming up were sisterhood and support of small business. And those are both topics that I am going to talk about. Well, support of small business, I talk about it just about every time I open my mouth. So everybody knows how I feel about that. But as far as sisterhood, it's not something that I've had a full conversation about yet. And I believe the reason why the recordings were so off is because I need to have a second sister on here with me to really talk about the issues with it. And I recently, a couple of days ago, had the opportunity to speak to somebody who I follow on Facebook. And the conversation that we had really just, it reminded me of something I had forgotten. For the people who are listening who actually know me, you know that I've always been one of those weird, I've got like 1, maybe 2 friends at a time kind of people. I've never been one to have a large circle of people around me because I don't feel comfortable with tons of people. I never have. So I have certain people that I kind of zero in on and that I click with, and those are my people. I've had the same best friend for over 15 years. The first time I met my best friend, my youngest child was 2 years old. And she is now 21. And I don't care where on the planet we live, what's going on. We are always best friends and always will be. And we have an understanding like no other, where if we don't see each other for a long time, because I now live like almost 2 hours away from her. If we don't see each other for a long time, when we see each other, it's just like no time has passed. I can say things and not even give a full thought, and she already understands what I've said, where I'm going with it. Drives the men around us crazy. But that is my best friend. If something is wrong and she needs me to be there, and everybody knows because of the condition, I've spoken about my health condition a few podcasts back. So I have I used to have this really bad issue with strokes, but I have this problem with my muscles weakening. So I was told years ago that it was absolutely a horrible idea for me to be behind the wheel of a car. And on a couple of occasions, I've actually tried to get back into the swing of driving, but I'm always terrified that if my legs go out, I'm going to slam into something. And if I don't kill myself, I'm most certainly going to take somebody else out. So I always said I wouldn't do that again until my legs got stronger. Now, at one point, I was willing to risk it because I like going places occasionally. I am more of a homebody, but my better sense, better judgment, I do have that sometimes. Kind of jumped out and said, don't be completely stupid. So I have not done that, but it has not stopped me from, I mean, that woman had surgery and needed me to come across town just to make sure that she had pancakes to eat. And I'm on my way. And she knows that. Whatever has to be done for me to get to where I have to get to, if something's going on and she needs me to be there. And during the times that I'm not there, she knows why I'm not there. She completely understands why there are certain places that I'm just not going to. And she has no issue with it. She doesn't bombard me with a lot of people because she knows I don't like being around a lot of people. Whereas she is like, social is I don't know what. Can make a party out of nothing. And I am more of I am in my room. I'm not going to party or do nothing with a whole bunch of strangers. Or with a whole bunch of people I like. I'm not going to go to too many large family gatherings. It's just how I've always been. And I remember my mother told me this story once where I was little. When I say little, I don't think I was even a year old yet. And she picked me up. And when she picked me up, I leaned back and looked at her like she had completely lost her mind. And she couldn't figure out. She was like, I was the oddest baby. She's like, she couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So she sat me back down by myself. And I went back to being just as happy as I was when she laid me down. I was great. She said I was giggly, I was playing, but every time somebody would touch me or attempt to pick me up, I would just tense up. And she was like, as I got older, they were concerned for a while because I would be like, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, they have a tendency to be extremely affectionate. And she was like, I would have moments where I was affectionate and I would be the most affectionate child you would ever met. And then I would have moments where I really just back up and give me 50 feet. Like, I really just need my space right now as a young child. So it's not shocking that I'm like that to this day. I don't like people running right up on me. I could see you coming towards me. If you start to move too quickly, I will move out the way. It's just something that has always been a part of who I am. And don't come for me, I'm working on it. But it's just always been who I am. I am very protective of my space. I am very protective of my energy. I don't let everybody in my house. I do not like people just coming and knocking on my front door without calling me first to let me know they're coming. I am the person who looks at you ringing the doorbell and won't answer. Like, that is me in a nutshell. Because I have this thing about just not letting any and everybody close up in my space. And it may sound crazy, but it is actually okay to guard your space. It really is. And I didn't understand when I was younger, but as I got older, something that I used to tell people when I was probably about 7, 8, 9 years old, and it had my mother's godmother looking at me sideways for a while. I used to always tell people that I could feel like their pain, literally feel it. And people thought there was something like for real wrong with me. Like, my mother has been asked several times if I've ever had exorcisms and I needed to be rebaptized. I've been baptized probably 4 good times in my life. Like, they really thought there was something wrong with me, um, because I could stand next to somebody and I could actually feel what was happening to them, to the point where it would start to overwhelm me. And as an adult, I've learned to not say certain things out loud. As a kid, I'm going to say whatever is on my mind loudly because I don't realize that there's something wrong with what I'm saying. And the very incident that comes to my mind, and y'all know how this podcast works, I will go down a rabbit hole, but trust me, I will loop back around and make it make sense. The very incident that comes to my mind is when I was probably about 6 or 7. I want to say about 7. Um, my mom used to take me down to Woolworths. I don't know how many of y'all older individuals are listening. Well, Woolworths has not been a thing in a very long time, but she used to take me to Woolworths in the basement to the counter. And at Woolworth's counter, um, they sold what I used to call glazed figure eight donuts because to me they look like an eight. Um, and they had crullers, and French crullers were my thing at like 6, 7. So she would take me down there because it was the only place that I could get a French cruller in the city that we lived in at the time. We lived in Toledo, Ohio. So she would take me there to get me one of the squiggly donuts. Now remember, I'm like 6.5, 7, and one of the glazed figure eights. And that was my time with my mommy. She would take me to go and sit at the Woolworth counter, and the lady behind the counter knew me, so she would make sure that, I had my chocolate milk and hyped up on sugar. And let me tell you, sidebar real quick, my mother and my grandparents, my mom's parents, they were forever with the glazed donuts and the chocolate milk. When I was little, that was like a treat for me. Like, I would go stay with my grandparents for like a week out of the year, and my grandfather would walk every single morning. There was a donut shop that wasn't far from their house. He would go every single morning and get me fresh donuts and the little cutie containers of chocolate milk for me to have in the morning. How I ever had teeth was impressive. But she took me down to the Woolworth counter, and there was this woman that sat next to me. And my mom used to watch real close because a couple of times people have tried to snatch me. So she always watched real close to make sure that nobody was sitting too close or reaching out or touching me. And the woman looked at me and she gave me the head nod to acknowledge that I was sitting there. And I stared at her and went back to eating my donut. And I always ate one at the counter and took one home. And the lady ordered something, and she sat there and she was talking to the lady behind the counter. And every now and then the lady behind the counter would come over and make sure I was okay. And then she would go back to what she was doing. And I had eaten my donut, and my mom had bought what she needed to buy or looked at what she needed to look at. And I was ready to go. So she packs up my one to go home, and we leave. And when we leave, we were taking the bus. My dad was at work. And me and my mom would get on the bus and we would just go places. So we were getting outside waiting to get back on the bus to go home. And I'm talking to my mom and I'm just playing around and she's holding on to my donut for me. And we were talking about stuff we were going to do when we get to the house. And the lady that was at the counter has now walked outside. And she walks outside and she stands next to me and my mom and she starts talking to my